Francis Coulson, welcome to the DCQ podcast special sits.
Thank you,
I'm
Peter.
really grateful to have you on, and I'm very, very thankful that you were accommodating to have this conversation over the weekend. So how are you, and from where are you joining us today?
I'm good. I'm joining from home. I've had a busy morning already, had a riding lesson, and I've been taking the dogs to a woof and waves swimming thing. So I've had to get in the water with the dogs. So I'm a bit disheveled, but
Beautiful,
it's
beautiful.
great fun.
So, for me, I'm actually joining from outside of the UK. I'm currently in the Netherlands,
Oh,
in Leiden.
nice.
Um, And, as I said at the start, when we talked about this, I think you have done, so much already, and you're still doing an awful lot. So I guess for this conversation, we have a lot to cover. But maybe we can start at the beginning. Where in the UK did you grow up? You're not born and bred London, are you?
Oh, no. I was born and bred in Sheffield, South Yorkshire, God's own county. Um, and I had a very happy childhood. My father was a solicitor, but he did property and commercial work. And so I worked in a solicitor's office from a very early age, probably from about 11 or 12, when my mother was keen to get us out of the house in the holidays. So I did
Wow.
all sorts of things like filing and doing the switchboard, which was a proper plug-in switchboard in those days. I used to read all the divorce confessions from the turn of the century, the previous century, because they'd all the adhesive had stopped. So I had a great time doing that and doing things like loose leaf filing, which fortunately no longer exists.
And were you, did you have any siblings that were, tasked to do the same thing, or were you picked for this honorable task?
I don't think I was picked. My father said, "Do anything else apart from law. Go and do property. Do something that makes money." He said. And none of my siblings have gone into the law. I've got one brother in insurance and one brother in movie catering, and my sister emigrated to Canada when she was 19, and she was a nanny, British nanny, very popular thing. And then she worked for Toronto, the local authority dealing with primary school children, and she retired. What did I say, a couple of years ago now?
Okay.
I'm the eldest.
So, but your dad, so would you then say that actually your dad is the reason why you decided to, pursue a career in law?
Yes, definitely. Certainly, I hate to say the words provincial because my father always hated that. But in a although Sheffield's a big city, it's a village professionally. I don't know if it's still the same now. Being a solicitor was something, to be proud of. It was a very well respected profession. But then in those days, being a bank manager was a very well respected profession. So um, it's changed. It all changed. So I thought it was a very important job, and also it was very interesting when I went into the office, and I thought you'd see people coming in sometimes who never, they would only see a solicitor once in their life, and they'd be worried and nervous about it. So doctors, lawyers, accountants, everybody were very respectable professions. So I wanted to do it from probably the age of 9, I would say.
Oh, wow. And so was that, a high street practice that your dad had?
Yes, it wasn't a shopfront practice. It was more commercial and property. His senior, he joined that practice because it was the only practice paying article clerks £3 a week when he already had me and my sister when he qualified. And my mum was a legal secretary, and she gave up work to look after the children. So money was tight.
So,
and
so everybody was actually, in or, supporting the business in one way or another.
Yes, absolutely, and entertaining clients and that sort of thing. I remember that. I remember learning to pour a party 7 from a very early age when clients and stuff would come round to the house, and yeah, it was endemic in the family. But again, locally there were things like Round Table and Tangent and Ladies Circle. It was the professions all knew each other. So when my father died in 2011, I think we had over 200 at the funeral. So the professions shut for the day. He was a great public speaker, and
Yeah.
he
So it
presented
was
a lot of
like,
things.
a noble profession still, and in a village in particular. you were just one of the village nobles doing
Yes,
that profession.
it felt like that to me as a
So,
child.
so you went to, to high school in Sheffield, but then you decided that maybe not stay in Sheffield. Let's move to London. Was that the decision that you made, or was there another reason why you studied law in London?
Well, at my school, Sheffield High School for Girls, from where I still have a very large number of friends and probably a group of at least 30 of my year, which still meet up regularly, which is great. A filter. Yeah,
That's great.
it's great.
Early signs of networking. That
Yeah.
right there.
Oh, yes, lots of networking. Yes. I applied to Oxford, and I passed the exam, but clearly failed the interview. So I didn't go to Oxford, much to my father's disappointment. But I really wanted to go to London. The school pushed us all to do Oxbridge, but I really wanted to go to London. I think it's the bright lights, really.
And
Um,
Francis, do you think that at the time, and maybe things have changed, but then when you sort of applied to Oxford, and the whole culture of Oxbridge, and was that very much a thing at that point in time? And do you think that that may be also why it was more difficult for somebody like yourself to get into Oxford or Cambridge?
Well, I think it was a thing. The school made it a big thing. We were fourth term applicants, so quite young. And I don't think we were given much guidance about which college to apply to. I applied to Corpus Christi, and I think I was interviewed at St Hilda's. I think my I was interviewed by somebody at St Hilda's who had been turned down for a professorship by my own grandfather, so that went well.
I hope they did hold that against you.
I'm I'm sure not. Anyway, I went to London, and I just loved it. I went to King's College London, which was a fantastic law school. Again, I made some really good friends, long-term friends that I again still see a lot of now. I thought the tuition was great. I lived in a hall of residence on Clapham Common South Side called Halliday Hall, which had been a five-star hotel in the 30s, so we were living in the lap of slightly dilapidated luxury, always being told off about how much hot water we were using. Um, but
Gone glory that was
it
around
was
you.
gone glory, but it was just a fantastic place to spend your first year, and then second year I was social secretary, so I stayed a second year. But in my first week at Halliday Hall, I met my still first husband. um,
Wow.
so, and he had come down to do chemistry from Newcastle, so he was a year ahead of me. And so that was it. And we got married in 1983, just after I graduated. He graduated the year before. So long, 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 long time ago. But yeah, it was a great time.
And at that point in time, there wasn't, the word special sits yet, right? That was something invented later.
Much
Uh,
later, yeah.
um, but was it in your mind very clear that you would go into private practice? And private practice, would that then just immediately be solicitor and not a barrister?
Yes.
Or what was there, some, well, maybe, different routes that you wanted to take? What was the thinking about that?
I'm not sure there was that much thinking. The school was very traditional. You did law, medicine, engineering, languages, history, geography, sort of it really. That was it. And so nobody said you could do a history degree and then do law, or maybe you could do an English degree and then do law, which I might have preferred actually. But anyway, I did a law degree, and of course the milk rounds start very early, and you're pretty much in those days you were made to elect bar or solicitor very early.
Yeah.
I opted for solicitor because that's what I knew. We didn't see many barristers in property and commercial in Sheffield. So, solicitor, and then I think that was just the trajectory. And then I wanted to go to London College of Law to do my solicitor's finals afterwards, but Sheffield City Council thought that was far too elite. And they wanted me to go to Sheffield Polytechnic, and I said no. And so we compromised on Chester College of Law, which was again a great law school, but very small environment. Only two people from my university. Other people went to Chester. Everybody else went to London. So
Wow.
I didn't like that. My husband was working in London, so that was also difficult. We spent a lot of time in Crewe on trains. So as soon as I could, I came back to London, and I remember applying for articles, from a red telephone box in Chester, doing my booking appointments and everything. And so I don't know. I had interviews, for instance, at Baker McKenzie, and an interview at Moonbeaver, which is, and I just liked a small firm. I don't know. My father had been in a small firm, seemed more immediate to people, and and they had one female partner already, which I thought was a
Wow, at
good
that
lot,
time, that's
good lot.
great. Yeah,
Yeah, because I think
and
at the time, Freshfields only had one female partner, and they were about 150 people, partners, so
yes, yeah. Well, you're definitely, in many respects, a trailblazer, but we'll get to that. So in law school, was there any, insolvency, restructuring on the curriculum? Did you think, that's an area I want to do?
no. No, obviously very set core subjects on the solicitor's finals, and there was a tiny bit of insolvency in business law, and that was it. And it was really a tiny section, so it didn't really figure in my thinking at all. Um, I thought I really wanted to do trusts and tax, succession and tax, because that seemed to me to be the most interesting area of law. When I did property, I like things like settled land and unregistered land and everything. But so that's what I thought I would do when I arrived at my first day of articles at Moonbeaver.
And maybe can you say something about Moonbeaver? I mean, it was a smaller firm, but it was a London firm, but it was around for quite a while, right? I mean, it wasn't a firm that had just set up.
No, no, no. It started in 1851 with the senior Willie Moon. And then I think his son was goalkeeper for England Football Club, when it was gentlemen and players. And so the firm developed very much as a private practice for private clients. It was very much private client work, property work. It was situated in Bloomsbury, so a lot of the clients were the Bloomsbury set literary clients. There were some very famous poets we had as clients. There were literary works lodged in the very enormous safe that took up half the basement. So I saw some very famous names when I arrived, but from years gone by where they'd set up family trusts and things.
Right.
Um, mm,
And was there at the time that you started there? You started there in, I think it's 1984,
84.
and was there already a practice, a bankruptcy or debt collection practice, or what was it, or was it actually no, there wasn't such a practice, but maybe there was the odd case that somebody did, and everybody had like a general practice. You did everything, but not specialized.
Well, it's a little bit specialised. We had, I think it was three senior private client partners, who all had good practices, and there'd been a few mergers historically, which had again bolstered the sort of real estate and private client sections. My principal was the only litigation partner, and he was really servicing any private client litigation where they had commercial disputes or personal disputes. But again, you would do a pretty rounded set of work. Even as a litigator, you do an awful lot of variety.
Yeah. And so how big was the firm when you started there?
I think it was 5 partners then, and I couldn't tell you now how many people there were. Uh, we were in one building at 24 Bloomsbury Square. We had a lease of both buildings as one lease, which was, I don't know how disastrously they entered into that, but anyway. And the building next door was sublet at the time to the Regular Forces Employment Agency, as I remember. So yeah, it was just one office there, and yeah, very things like very old probate clerks, and we had a very elderly managing clerk called Edwin who was fantastic, and he had probably trained a lot of the masters and things that I was then having to appear in front of. He was fantastic.
Yeah. So this is the 80s. I mean, 86 you qualify, and then in 2 years' time you make partner. That is, if people hear that these days, they will not understand how that is possible.
Yeah. Well, yes, so I was working with my principal doing litigation. I wanted to do. I thought that I would, as I said, do trusts and probate. But on the day one, when I sat with my fellow victim, article clerk, they just sort of said, "You're in litigation and you're in private client." And I went, "Oh no, oh no." But then at the College of Law, it was in those days. You just learnt the white book. You weren't taught much exciting litigation. But
So
I
the white book is really, the rules and procedures,
Yes,
civil
exactly.
procedure, right? Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. Not very exciting to a 21-year-old. So, from the minute I started practicing it, I absolutely loved it. The variety and the people and the going to court and everything. I just loved it straight away. So, I started doing that and working for some existing clients, and then we would do a
And
little.
what was it? Were you helping businesses that were in trouble? Were you helping, IPs or banks, or was it a mix, or just
No,
trade creditors that had
no.
something to do? Was it personal bankruptcies? Was it corporate bankruptcies? Was it liquidations only? No rescues?
No, we did. We acted. We were largely a plaintiff, claimant firm. So we acted for businesses pursuing debts. So obviously, we would come into contact with bankruptcy and winding up. Bankruptcy. Oh my word, it was hard work. Doing individual petitions by hand and then going down to court to issue them and queuing up for a long time whilst a clerk in the bankruptcy court found fault. One word wrong, and they'd be sent back to the back of the queue to change it and re-verify it and all that sort of thing. It was quite labour intensive. And I think, and also I think then I asked if I could advertise in the Law Society's Gazette for London agents' work, because I was aware that my father had an appointed London agent, and they were paid an annual retainer, which was news to me. So I swiftly persuaded my father to use us as London agent. But it seemed to me a brilliant way to get more interesting work. So we ended up advertising in the back of the Law Society's Gazette for many years. And before 1999, all the big cases came to London, and you needed a London agent to deal with the work. So we had fantastic cases. We were in the House of Lords, in the Court of Appeal, we were in the family courts, we were in the administrative courts. I was doing advocacy. I absolutely had the best time. And so that also brought in more sort of commercial work. And I think the first pure insolvency stuff I had, we must have had a case where, when I was training, we had a case, and I think BDO might have been involved and got appointed or something. And we went and had lunch with them. And I thought, well, I think you get a better class of lunch in insolvency, actually. um, and all the courses at the time, whilst I was just qualified, were in insolvency because the 86 Act was just in.
Oh yeah, 86 was just
Yeah,
was just adopted. You were
yeah,
there
yeah. All
when
the CPD
when
was
you
in
qualified.
insolvency.
It started.
Yeah. So it was interesting. It was interesting. So that's how I started doing insolvency, really. And it was just an interesting, newly, codified, as it were, area of the law. So that's how that started. And then in 1988, I would say, started doing work for a London local authority, which involved quite a lot of insolvency. And then later that year, somebody from Customs and Excise walked in through the door, literally just walked in through the door, because they used to have an office up at Tavistock Square. Don't think they still do. And they just said, well, we can't get any solicitors to do us swears on credit. And we don't want to be forking out our own cash. But they used to serve their own statutory demands and the officers, and then they'd have to go and swear an affidavit of service in those days. So they said, would you please do the swears on credit? So, well, that's a bit of a pain because,
A glorious
VAT, can't remember how
task
much
to
it
do.
was then, but £3 now. It's not gone up for a million years, and it's a real nuisance. But I thought, well, all right then. So we started doing that, and it wasn't many months later when the same officers came in and said, Mrs. Thatcher says we have to start market testing. We have to go out to the private sector, and we have to start market testing for debt collection. Do you want to do some debt collection for Customs and Excise? Yes, okay. So
There's obviously, a steady stream of work coming out of that direction, I would imagine.
marvelous. You've got to love 80s procurement. So so we started off doing it, and we just added lots of VAT officers because we did a good job, and then they'd refer us to somebody else. And then come 1999, I think they probably realised that they should be actually doing a full procurement exercise, so they did. And we were lucky enough to secure London, which was the principal, obviously, because most of the company's stuff was there. So we continued to do it, and it was really from then on, an officer brought in some of his criminal colleagues, because I think it was a case where it was a carousel fraud case. The chap had absconded, so they weren't going to be able to prosecute him, at least not until they could extradite. But there was £1 million just left sitting there. So they brought the officer along to me and said, could you help?" So I said, yeah, we could do that. So we did that, and then we did a few of those. And so I started doing quite a bit of carousel fraud there. And then I think the carousel criminals got a little tiny bit more sophisticated. So you started getting more buffer companies, and you'd have an intervener applying when you've tried to freeze the money, saying, "Oh, actually, it's our money because." So I was saying, well, I think you should, do a provisional liquidations, because we can not give them any warning and so forth. So again, we started to do some of those, and
All for HMRC.
all for HMRC, and we were contracted up until 2004, and then we lost the contract, which was devastating because we were doing a lot of work. We had a lot of staff doing it. It was a real blow.
Why was that?
Life's
Because
over,
there
you
was
think?
more competitors, or they were, very much on the cost and trying to go for the cheapest, or how did that, or was it just, well, you guys have done it too long, we need to give it to somebody else?
I think their procurement had just got much more sophisticated. It may have been an element of you've been doing this for a very long time, and I'm sure the other lawyers probably put in a more sophisticated bid. I'm not sure. But
Mm.
you just got to pick yourself up and get on with life, haven't you? And we did get a huge wave of sympathy from insolvency practitioners, and even the new incumbents were kind. I gave them all our precedents. They weren't too mean about transferring work. So quite a civilized handover. And so we just started acting more for the practitioners themselves, and it continued to be interesting. It just continued to be interesting. I love
So
the element of tackling fraud using
yes,
insolvency.
so 1999, 1988 up to 2000, sort of, you ride the wave of HMRC, getting more and more involved in cases, and introduced sort of to fraud cases in particular.
Yeah.
And then, that expands in the 2000s to IPs as well. But was it always, I guess, contentious, and focused on, that part of the market
Yeah.
that deals
Yeah.
with fraud, and was it, so it was recovery work, and was it also liquidation work at that point in time? Because that period, it looks like a lot of the insolvency work, if it was not trying to trace assets and get fraudsters to pay for what they've done, it's sort of liquidation. It is not the sophisticated footwork of trying to rescue
Yeah.
companies.
Yeah.
Uh, um, uh, is that right? That was sort of the practice then.
Yeah, we were almost entirely contentious. Insolvency, we'd sometimes do non-contentious, but really, and then my partner Daniel did the business sales or the real estate stuff. But we were just known for that, and that's what we had spent a lot of time doing. And that's where we'd built the staff and the other partners up. We had an expertise in doing that, and it's interesting. And even in a liquidation, I always thought, and all the time up until I was R3 president and beyond, trying to encourage practitioners to look at their files in their bottom drawers and say, there are probably claims there, and creditors could be getting a better return if you look at the claims. And of course, you've got to risk because there's no money. It's been
There's no sort of facility to sort of fund, I guess,
exactly.
IPs with an empty estate to go after. maybe, anti-avoidance transactions or,
Exactly.
rights exercised. None of that. You just need to take a risk and hope that it, results in getting monies in.
Exactly, absolutely, and I think, we all, I think we've got a duty to creditors. IP's got a duty to investigate. I think you can look at options. There wasn't really any litigation funding available then, and CFAs were sort of, starting to be regulated and available.
Contingent fee arrangements, right,
Lots
for
of
those
discussion
who.
about championshty and maintenance. I
Yeah,
remember that, very exciting. But, as long as you had a portfolio of cases, you could pretty well guarantee that was going to be financially successful. Obviously, you have to work really hard. You will have to carry a lot of work in progress. But at the end of the day, if you've got a decent portfolio, you should be able to make a profitable practice doing that.
and was most of the work London work, or was it actually throughout the UK? Was it cross-border, or very much, regional, London and just outside, or was it national? What type of work was it?
Yeah, we was definitely national, in terms of the cases. I mean, the IPs are all over the country. In some cases, they were just maybe appointed off the rota. We went through a period of having a pilot with the official receiver for a specialist rota because I think in those days there weren't so many people with experience of CFAs of entering into partnership with counsel on CFA and with investigators, for example. So it was definitely national, but obviously then you had to go cross border usually to find the assets, quite often to find the assets, or because some of the frauds, for example, some of the carousel frauds or the excise duty frauds, obviously there were co-conspirators abroad. So I remember having to use the EU directive with the Portuguese authorities, and they were a bit resistant to provide information, but then all we really had to do eventually was translate the directive into Portuguese, which didn't seem to be available very easily, and then run through it with them, and they realised that that was fine. They could cooperate and give us all the information. So building that evidence, and we had some very exciting trials. It was really good fun.
And was there a big change when the Enterprise Act came into force early 2000s?
Well, at that time, obviously, we were still acting for well, as it was, Customs
Just
Excise.
about HMRC still,
Yeah.
right?
So we were still doing a lot of work for them then. There was also the transitional period for bankruptcy. So we did uh, a project for Customs and Excise dealing with the transitional cases where the matrimonial home obviously had to a period where in some of the very historic bankruptcies they had to be realised or the equity had to be realised. And I also went along to the Inland Revenue and proposed a similar project with them, and they had a spend to save project with the Treasury, I think, so that they were able to put that pilot together. And so the profession itself, the insolvency profession, got lots of bankruptcies out where they had to deal with the matrimonial home. So that kept everybody pretty busy for that
Those were
transitional
personal
period.
bankruptcies as
Personal
opposed to
bankruptcies, yeah.
corporate
But
bankruptcies.
but obviously the Enterprise Act changed a lot in terms of the whole sea change or from administrative receivership to
To
administration
administrations. Yep.
was just like a whole scene changer, really. I mean, it was totally different, I think. And I think some firms struggle to see the difference sometimes. And maybe they were still not wasn't their thing to be then pursuing the company or its directors or whatever beyond the immediate process. Um,
And what was, because you were sort of building through the 90s and the early 2000s a practice that I think historically was not, didn't have the sort of glamorous reputation within a law firm and within, I guess, private practice. Uh, did you see that change over time? And why do you think that has changed?
I think, yeah, I mean, insolvency itself wasn't almost everybody you speak to over a certain age in insolvency has fallen into it by mistake, because it was not seen as a particular profession. Obviously there weren't licenses before the act, and so gradually over time, I think it's just been seen more as an individual profession in itself. It's been more and more fully regulated, and so and you know, back in the day, I suppose pre the financial crisis, and even then, there were lots of things in the press with IPs with undertakers' outfits on and coffins, and just seen as burying things and being the bad guy. And I think the Enterprise Act and the whole and the change in the how the profession was viewed in rescuing businesses, but specifically jobs. I think people saw that the profession rescued jobs, and that sort of publicity, I think, has been good for the profession. I think the profession has had to work pretty hard to explain that story to everybody because if somebody says if you say to somebody I deal with insolvency and this well what exactly do you do? So if you can explain that it rescues jobs and I firmly believe that it creates a level playing field. The insolvency service is there to deliver economic confidence, and they're there to ensure also fair competition as well as returns to creditors. And I think that involves tackling the wrongdoers. Those people who are not paying their tax, not paying their staff properly, not complying with health and safety, not complying with environmental regulations, are unfair competition for those businesses that are.
Yeah.
So I think, the insolvency uh, law is well able to tackle that and make sure there's a better, fairer playing field and that creditors get a fair return when things go wrong. And directors get punished financially when things go wrong, but not unfairly.
And what is the role? Because maybe for those who are listening and are not so familiar with the insolvency service, what is their role? Obviously, they provide the official receiver as well in cases where there's no IPs that can take the role of administrator or liquidator. But there's more to that than just that, right?
Well, the since sort of middle of about 15 years ago, so time flies. In a petition, obviously, the official receiver is automatically appointed liquidator, automatically appointed trustee in bankruptcy. So they're the first port of call anyway. Obviously not for voluntary liquidations. Um, so insofar as they can, they may deal with the case themselves. They have a very, I think, generally quite a loyal staff, and you know genuinely work the cases, and a loyal sort of executive, keen on doing the best they can. The There seems to be a usual difference of opinion between the profession and the service about whether there's a fair distribution of work and whether creditors are able to appoint their own practitioner if they want to. Um, but generally, both sides, if you like, are trying to do the same job. They're trying to ensure that all of the assets are brought in and they're fairly distributed in accordance with the legislation. Now, obviously, some cases are more complex than others. They may involve cross-border recoveries. They may involve, we've seen the development of the special administrations, the special manager role, with things like British
For
Steel or
like
Carillion.
specialized
Yeah,
areas,
yeah,
like
yeah,
water transport, like infrastructure companies.
yeah. And where the government really is going to be the sort of last resort, then the service is managing those cases with the aid of skilled specialist private sector insolvency practitioners as special managers. So that's a development. The role of the adjudicator, as if somebody wants to make themselves bankrupt, then the adjudicator takes all those cases. All those cases would previously have gone to the court, but 99% of bankruptcies pretty much are consumer, very, very low asset bankruptcies, and so they're much more dealt with administratively now. And I know, I think the service has been building its investigation capabilities so that they also maximise the return to creditors.
So when you started, and maybe fast forward to today, uh, um, insolvency, restructuring, financial distress is the mentality towards that in the country changed? Because you were saying, look, and it's across the globe. I think
Mm.
it's very personal. People feel that they have failed. They're embarrassed, and it is something that they rather just deny than admit to. And you and I know that the longer you deny and not do anything about it, the less likely it is that we can actually do an awful lot about it. And it is something that is, a normal part of doing business is, at certain point in times, you will face financial distress. But if you can deal with it and it's actually something that you can, early recognize, there's stuff that you can do.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are
Yeah.
tools in the toolbox, more so than we had previously. But do you think that the mentality has changed as well? And how so? What was the driver for the change in mentality? You said, look, Enterprise Act comes in, we're more going towards rescue. But okay, saying that you're going towards rescue is one thing. Actually having a change in mentality towards financial distress is another. Do you think that there has been a development there in the UK, and maybe, London and outside of London is different? I don't know. Maybe personal bankruptcies and corporate bankruptcies also different.
Hmm.
What have you seen?
I think personal and corporate are different. Um, uh, there's been quite a lot of work done, certainly before and in the run up to and since the Enterprise Act, trying to remove the stigma of bankruptcy, because bankruptcy, people do still feel a stigma, but it's there for relief. And if you can't, if you can't manage your debt and there's nowhere else to go, give yourself a fresh start. I think it's a great relief to a lot of people when they finally accept that that is the route for them, because they can start
But do
again.
you think, Francis, because you were sort of explaining how your practice evolved on the back of HMRC and the carousel frauds, isn't it the case that, yeah, with a lot of people, financial distress is associated or equals fraud, and
Yeah,
therefore,
yeah,
that doesn't help admitting that there is financial distress. And maybe you've started over time specializing in fraud. But don't you agree that actually, fraud is only, a relatively minor part of, the financial distress
yeah,
all around that is there?
yeah.
Uh, but it is obviously the part that is most reported on. And I guess, very much associated with the general person, in the street
Yeah,
with financial distress.
yeah.
And that doesn't help facilitate a rescue culture.
No, I agree. And yes, fraud, most people that fail in business is just a genuine failure. It's a combination of circumstances. Who could predict that half your supplies might not arrive because Iran's been invaded? You know, who can predict that the energy costs are going to go sky high because of Ukraine? And business is risky. Being in business is risky, whether you're a sole trader or whether you're in a limited company. But it's good for the country for people to try to establish business and to try and increase productivity. And by trying and being entrepreneurial, of its very nature, people will sometimes fail. And the whole system is designed to be able to efficiently process that failure and enable people to start again. Um, Now, if you're a creditor, say locally, and you see a business has gone down and then it starts up again, obviously people feel aggrieved because I haven't been paid and yet the same director is still trading. And it's very hard to get across that, why that is, that we want that business to flourish. He might be employing other people, and perhaps we don't educate suppliers enough to do their own credit sort of checks and their own due diligence and have proper contracts when they enter into supply contracts with retention of title or whatever. People just sometimes don't think about it, and so a little bit the fault may be theirs when they don't get a recovery out of an insolvency. But we have to have a balance. If we were so cautious that nobody was allowed to do anything without money up front, or so much capital, we would
Can't do any business.
frozen. We would do no business. So everybody has to accept an element of risk in business. And so long as you are following, you understand your director's duties, and the Insolvency Service now has the director's hub. So, and I would very much like to push for that to be something a director has to sit through a video when they incorporate or something to explain that limited
Exactly.
comes with responsibilities, and they're statutory responsibilities, and you need to understand them. This isn't just you trading on your own account and hooray, I get out of jail free. You have responsibilities, and those become responsibilities to your creditors if you're in financial trouble. But these are the things that can be done to help if you get to that stage. But I think people work very hard, and sometimes they're just focused on survival. And at that point, your duties might go out of the window when you're trying to put food on the table or whatever. But I think the more we can educate people about that, and the more we can reiterate that limited liability is a privilege and it comes with responsibilities. But if you remember those and you act honestly, then there should be no comeback on you, and you should be able to fail and start again. Many big businesses have failed right at the beginning and started again. And actually, we wouldn't get all of the technological innovations that we have if people weren't allowed to commit their R&D, and maybe the first business fails, and that R&D money perhaps is a tax loss. But actually, if it's genuine, but actually, at the end of the day, if you have a successful second or third business that produces productivity for the country and produces great technology, then that's a win long term for the country.
Absolutely. Well, in my experience and in my life, I've always found that the encouragement of doing things, being entrepreneurial, have a go, and then, not being uh, tarred and feathered
Yeah,
for life
yeah,
if it doesn't go the way you had hoped it go. I think the example in the US has always been that across the board, there's much more encouragement
yes,
for people doing that.
yes.
And for a long time, and maybe still today, that is, sort of the blueprint for um, a rescue culture. I think that the UK and Europe, mentality has always been, oh, if you do something that is a little bit out there, a little bit off the beaten track, it's as if people are just waiting for you to fail so they could say, look, I
Told you.
thought so. You shouldn't be thinking that you're special. Just stay in your lane. Don't go. But as you say, if you want to, push the boundaries, develop, grow, then you need to have people that trailblaze
Mhm.
and that, have an opportunity to fail. But obviously, you need to be able to explain what the reasons were, and that actually this person has done what is required to do, whatever it is you need to do to just then say, okay, I can start with a new clean slate. And maybe that is not communicated enough to creditors, because creditors then, yeah, see the same person doing something else 5 years on, 10 years on. They're like, well, my old claim, is
It's
still
finished.
outstanding and is never going to be paid. And
Yeah.
look, this guy or this woman is now doing so well. What about me? But again, that is, as
But
you
that's
say, maybe
education.
just too much blinkers on and not seeing the bigger picture. And obviously, you always need to be vigilant for the people who are abusing the system. Limited liability, great. We have a corporate entity, so it's not you personally, but you can't abuse it. You need to use it. And if it doesn't work, then you can fail and start again. What is it? Is it communication? How, or is it just inherent sort of human behavior that you're just envying anybody else's success?
Yeah, I
and
think
that
you're
you
right
sort of,
about America. America, everybody goes, "Yay!" when somebody, succeeds, and perhaps in Europe, everybody goes, "Well, who do you think you are? You're so successful." And there's a bit of Schadenfreude maybe when there's a failure. But I think the more we talk about these things and have the broader conversation, because with the entrepreneur that's trying, who needs to remember to keep some records and The judiciary in England are fantastic. In the UK are fantastic. They don't substitute commercial decisions. They get that people have to make decisions under pressure in business. So I think it's a very healthy environment for business in terms of the legal framework and the judicial look back, if you like. Um, but also creditors, if we're having that discussion, then people who are supplying into other businesses also, I know many credit companies and whatever would say, well, why didn't you look into that company before you supplied it? Why didn't you monitor your credit limits? Why didn't you, stop supplying when you got to this much? Well, I thought, because the problem in a lot of businesses, to a salesman, a sale is a sale as soon as he's signed the contract, and to credit control, it's a sale when they've had the money. And those two people never talk to each other, and so that's a problem. But if we're all talking about it and saying, look, the country needs businesses to try and fail, try, and if they fail, to try again. But suppliers also need to be thinking about their own um, duties to their own company and not be recklessly supplying or not chasing up their debts and whatever quickly or whatever. So all levels of the supply chain need to be well managed. But we've got to encourage people to trade. And it's interesting, with so many businesses now funded by private equity. I just did a piece for Install your last newsletter, just mentioning that because there's a lot of new money obviously coming into the country, and businesses may fail and be purchased, and private equity obviously wants to see its margins. They want to see money back, so I think they impose more discipline on the business, perhaps, and maybe that will increase the overall learning in business about how to better manage things and
It's interesting you say that because, in our story, we were sort of, early 2000s, and my experience, I came to this country in 2000, so early 2000s. I started with a U.S. law firm first in the U.S., and then back in London, and they were very much a firm that assists bondholders, distressed investors, and creating a secondary market for distressed debt is maybe a way and a tool to create an environment of rescue as
mm,
opposed to liquidation. You can, allow professionals into the situation, so the emotive elements are sort of out of it, and the people that are involuntarily in a situation and don't want to actually deal with it, you provide them with an exit out of it, and therefore, hopefully, the professionalization of the area will, assist maybe earlier intervention, what you say, private equity coming in and actually making sure that there is a lot more
yes, the discipline.
focus on the
Yeah, yeah,
finances,
yeah,
early warning signs, and therefore you can still do something if you know it early. If you're just with your blinkers on, moving forward, and you just don't stop until it's too late, then
yeah.
there is,
Well, I
you
think
know,
the Italians have just implemented something where you have to have a sort of accountant foisted upon you if you're approaching distress, so that there is a sort of formally appointed second pair of eyes with a bit more control, which is an interesting concept. I mean, England's a nation of shopkeepers. A lot of the businesses are small businesses, if not sole traders, really, and so. There's a balance there with the cost. It's great if it's a big business and private equity wants to come in and rescue it, but 90% probably of businesses in the UK are very small, not going to attract a vast amount of external investment.
in that respect, the UK is not alone, right?
No,
Because I think look at other continents, the Far East, Asia, Africa. Obviously, also it is um, micro and small businesses,
yeah,
maybe some medium businesses, but
yeah,
that's it. and obviously in London, we're easily in the bubble of only seeing the big ticket situations, but those are the exceptions, not the rule, are
Yeah,
they?
yeah, absolutely. And we need the productivity of the small businesses, which form most of our trade, really. We need their productivity and their financial knowledge to be improved. So again, I think it very much boils down to communication and education. We can't expect private equity to swoop into your local corner shop and take that over. You need that business to just be running along proper lines. So I do think the director hub is a good idea. I think personally, I think that anybody signing up to be a director should be made to watch a video and to run through a test to show they understood it. Even if you had to renew that, because people put down the word director as a profession. So they say, I'm a company director, and that's something they're proud of, and it's a profession. So make it slightly more professional. Make it so that they actually have a knowledge of their statutory duties that come with being a company director, and perhaps refresh those every 3 years. And I think the service is starting to look at the disqualification regime now. Again,
The disqualification of directors,
yeah,
if you
yeah,
actually, done stuff that is not just, okay, you were out of luck, it was other causes, but you actually failed in performing your duties to such an extent that you really shouldn't be a director again, then you could be disqualified for a number of years
yes, up to
to,
15.
to be so. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And you may get a compensation order, and you will end up probably paying the costs of this service bringing those proceedings against you. So um, it is a privilege, and you're a company director. So just take the time. You wouldn't go and drive on. You're not allowed to go and drive on the road without learning the rules of the road and passing a test. You know, you can cause a lot of devastation in business to other businesses by not knowing what you're doing. So just make
That's right. You
care of
can
your.
become a parent, though, without any license whatsoever.
Well, that is true. That is true. You very much learn on the
That's
job there,
maybe a
don't you?
cause of. So you're mentioning that there is a in your sort of practice, and maybe also in the development of the special sits space in the UK. The great financial crisis in 2008 was very significant. Lehman went, and basically lots of banks were in huge trouble, and maybe that has also changed. The banks being the primary
Yes, definitely.
stakeholder in insolvencies going forward. How did you experience that change, and what do you think has changed following 2008?
Well, I think the principal banks that were the banks then seemed to become inert in terms of not. They took such a beating, didn't they, in 2008, and everybody's saying you're the bad guys. That they seem to then not take action, even where they probably should take action, and then that I think allowed, as we all have talked about for many years, this enormous lump of zombie companies to just drag the country back, really, not allowing refreshment of capital and human capital and financial capital into more productive businesses, just sat there dragging the economy back. But then we've had a huge number of new entrants into the obviously the lending market, and new banks and new everything. I think sometimes they're a little bit perhaps young in their approach, shall we say, and perhaps it's enthusiasm or whatever. But again, I think they may get their fingers a bit burnt in terms of lending. And I think it would be good to have again lots of open dialogue with those lenders about the regime and about when enforcement should happen and when rescue should happen. Um, yeah, I've seen a case recently again in real estate, which is and it's probably a newer lender, and I think it's a situation where everybody could come out okay, but they seem to be a little bit nervous about their decision making, and maybe that will mature. But it's a very different environment to pre the financial crisis now.
And do you think that because we were talking about individual cases. Well, individual cases is usually, a bilateral situation between, a business and their bank. And, if they don't pay, that turns into, a non-performing loan, an
Yeah.
NPL, right?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
lots of banks had huge, NPLs that they just didn't deal with and
Yeah. Just
and
sat there.
couldn't
Yeah.
deal with.
Yeah.
And the financial crisis obviously has brought that to the fore. There's more regulation now on banks, and maybe there's then also an incentive to do something with those NPLs. I mean, we saw around just after or around the time of the great financial crisis, we saw a lot of NPL auctions, right? Banks
Yeah.
that were
Yeah.
forced to sell their
Yeah.
non-performing loans. And we
Yeah.
also had structures where, a a good bank and a bad bank was created to facilitate the offloading of these NPLs. Do you think that, with hindsight, was successful? And, is that something that you believe um, is something you can export in other parts of the world that are still very much struggling with NPLs and their banks not doing anything with it? I mean, we were forced in it, in the UK and Europe through the great financial crisis. But yeah, was it very much, a solution for our problem that you can't transport anywhere else? Or do you think actually, now that we have that technology, we can sort of use it elsewhere?
Yeah, you probably could use it elsewhere. Yeah, I think. I mean, it's supposed to be a free market. Lend money, enforce if you will, don't if you don't. But actually, banks are in a unique position, aren't they? Because they have all the financial data. They have a lot of control. And if they allow something to just run on and run on, other smaller creditors of that company are probably being lulled into a false sense of security, and being put into a worse position because the non-performance, the breach is not being dealt with in a timely manner.
Bank is just letting it go and therefore creating, full security for others
Yeah,
to continue.
exactly. And the
Interest.
same could be said of the tax authorities. They're in it, and the utilities. They're involuntary creditors. And so and it's our money in the case of the tax authorities. So, but you don't want them to be overly harsh when a business could recover, could survive. So they need people within them that are experienced and are able to make some sort of commercial judgment whether something's rescuable or not, and whether it needs to go into a process. I mean, I think the revenue doing quite a lot of variable time to pay and so forth. It's very difficult for them to judge, I think, because from a distance, it's it's the taxpayers' money, and that business should be paying it back. Making a judgment as to whether it is going to pay it back, whether you're going to shut it down immediately and lose a lot of other people their jobs, it's never an easy decision for anybody.
Well, yeah,
That's the balance.
we've fast forward to today and our new restructuring, well, not so new anymore, the restructuring plan and the Waldorf case, sort of second go around. We've seen that HMRC wanted to be special and considered special, but you know, in many ways, it's also just one of the creditors. But as you, I think, rightfully say, others are looking at HMRC to sort of, take the lead or not to take the
Yeah,
lead in things. And if they're not doing anything, it creates a false sense of security.
it does. I think I'd feel less sympathy for the banks in not taking a lead because the revenue, like all of government sort of industry, it's got limited resource. I know I've even had fraudsters say, "Well, they didn't do anything, so I kept going." And it's like, well, it's not a get out of jail free card if you don't get stopped. It's a bit the same in business. They can't tackle every business's problem. They're not going to see every business's problem. They've got finite resource. Banks, banks, they can tell when somebody goes overdrawn by a quid. They could probably spot financial distress and make a more rapid commercial decision. Um, but the restructuring plan's a great invention. It'll be good to see it being able to be used by smaller businesses. I think at the moment it's still cost prohibitive.
We
Um,
need to have a little bit more standardized
yes,
documentation,
yeah, yeah,
and the only, precedents we have is in very complicated
yeah,
situations,
yeah,
which you can't use as a precedent for something that is, a different level and
yeah,
scale
no,
altogether,
no,
which
it needs
which
to be
is
smaller. Yeah,
which is tricky, isn't it?
yeah. I mean, I think the courts are being as helpful as they can be in trying to push that. I know Mark Phillips, KC, has done quite a lot of work with Alison Goldthorpe, who
Yeah,
pushing,
obviously he was the KC,
yes,
making the case for HMRC,
yes.
but
But
there we
he's
go.
pushed it for smaller businesses, and I think that's a good
Yeah,
thing. And we, in our own practice, talking about where we came from in more contentious work, since 2018, seeing the way things are going, I've been bringing in more and more non-contentious lawyers. We just had Fenella Fogarty join us from RPC, which is great, and building that up, that side of the business, because it's nice when those two elements of the business work hand in hand, because you may have, an administration or, you know, or whatever, CVL, and then you'll have a longer tail perhaps with investigations. You get the business away, you'll then have a longer tail with investigations. So the two sides work well hand in hand, and it's been good to balance up that side of the business a bit more. And it's such an interesting area, isn't it? As you said, the complex restructurings. We've now got, we're now 25 people in my team, and so we've got
yeah. I
four
mean, maybe just hone in on that a little bit, because we sort of, we got to the financial
putting the word to
crisis,
rights.
post-financial crisis, and yeah. So you've had, you know, a long run at Moon Beaver, but at some point in time, I guess, the legal market is changing dramatically as well, right? We
Yeah,
see, on the one hand, boutique firms coming up, but on the other hand, also mammoth, large, firms that have, been created. And a lot of U.S. firms entered, the London market. We've seen that. Um, how did you then sort of end up with, I guess, the proposition of joining forces with the firm that has now incorporated
yeah.
Moonbeam?
Yes, well, I mean, yeah, the legal profession has changed a lot. The regulation has increased, obviously greatly, which is fine, but it takes up a lot of time. The need for technology is, as we all know, it's just increases every day exponentially. And things like professional indemnity insurance are very unpredictable and up and down. So, and I think we took the view few years ago that we should go into a larger organization because of economies of scale, because of succession, because we were very specialized with insolvency, with some property and private client from the historic business. But so we started to just, well, I suppose just be receptive to approaches. So I spoke to a lot of people, often just quite casually. You always learned something about another practice when you spoke to their managing partner or their board or whatever. And then we were speaking to Westlake Bell and another firm, and then COVID happened and it stalled a bit. And then when it looked as if it wasn't going away, we just thought, oh, hey, let's just get on with it. It really is we don't know how long this is
So
going.
so it changed because you were explaining like five partners and
Yeah,
say,
yeah,
a handful of staff on top of that when you started. I think it had grown to like 10
yes,
partners and quite a bit of staff around it at the
yeah,
time that you decided to merge with Westlake Bell.
yeah. We were
And
about 75
now the the
in all.
the,
Yeah.
the merged firm is how big are they?
Yeah, so we're just over 90 partners. I think I did I had to check that because I did an interview for the lawyer, and we have to keep checking because we've had quite a lot of new partners join. Moonbeaver merged into Westlake Bell in July 21, so we
Yep.
were 75 people in all. We came in, everybody came in, and it's been a great home for us. We came because the culture was similar to our own. It was proper professional services firm, not too sharp-elbowed and pinstriping, whatever. And the culture was right. It was friendly. It was nurturing of its people. with enough allowance to, encourage people, and great relationships with the junior staff and everything. So everybody has found a happy home from us there. The firm itself has been adding on people with a lot of lateral hires since we joined. Um, but it went
Yeah,
up.
but it's a UK firm, right? It doesn't have foreign
No,
offices,
it's just London.
so
Just
it's
London. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Technically,
and
be
it's
be
and
one
the
office.
biggest
Yeah.
base is also London, right?
London, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But we obviously have a lot of international reach through lot of international clients, a lot of clients in the Middle East and in places like Turkey and China and wherever. Fortunately, we didn't have many in Russia, but so we've got good international reach, a lot of very good relationships, a lot of organisations. Obviously, at the moment, I'm president of Insol Europe. One of
I
my
wanted to go there indeed because the private practice is one thing, but you've been extremely busy alongside private practice in various organizations as well. You're currently the president of Insol Europe,
yes,
a large organization of, I guess, insolvency practitioners. People that work in the special sit space,
yes,
and you've also been, a past president of R3, which is a more, UK focused. I mean, maybe you can explain what is the difference between R3 and Insol Europe, for example.
yes. R3 was always difficult to explain, so they developed a sort of tagline for the press, really, which says the insolvency trade body. So its members are almost all domestic, licensed insolvency practitioners, insolvency lawyers, barristers, bankers, and for people around the industry in that
Yeah,
way.
but just not only legal. It's everybody
Practitioners,
related
yeah,
because you
yeah,
also have the insolvency lawyers associations ILA, but you also have the insolvency
yeah.
practitioners.
Mainly insolvency practitioners, yeah. It's
Yeah,
the principal trade body for insolvency practitioners, something like 3,000 members, I think, from memory. And very good for educational purposes, and for dealing with regulatory issues. Has very good relations with the insolvency service. Promotes the interests of the profession, which to me is the interests of the country, because very instrumental at promoting success of industry. So R3 was a great thing, and I was persuaded to get into R3 by Steve Hill, who was a PwC partner who joined Moonbeaver back in the day, which took everybody's great surprise. But he said he just liked the practice of insolvency, I think, and the higher up you get in a very large organisation, the less of your actual practice.
what was he a lawyer? No, he was not
No,
a
he was an
solicitor.
insolvency practitioner at PwC.
Exactly, but which shows you that that was um, I guess a modern approach towards being a law firm, but having also non-lawyers in the same practice,
Yes.
alongside solicitors.
Yes, but the other person who pushed me into R3 and subsequently into Insol Europe was Michael Pryor, who joined us from the Barrows. Again, they had a retirement policy, so he joined us, I think, aged about 63, and he stayed with us a long time until his sad and untimely death. But he was a great internationalist. He was on the Apprentices' Rights Committee of the IBA. He was very keen on Insol Europe, on R3, and they both encouraged me to get involved in those sides of the profession and the lobbying and everything else. And I think that was probably the biggest thing for me. They were both really encouraging. They were so well connected, both of them, and they were really great. And so I don't ever regret doing that. People say, "Well, you've got a full-time practice. How can you do R3 and everything?" And I know all of the presidents, past and uh, you know, before and after me will think the same thing. But they do a great job because they care about the profession. Sonia Jordan's the new R3 president, and she's already great. She's proud to be president, and that's great for the profession.
Can we maybe say something about your sort of role as also trailblazer in a space that, when I started in 1995, it was very much still, white male, older white male dominated, and things have changed, quite significantly. And obviously, it's a sort of toxic term these days, diversity, equity, and inclusion. But whatever people want to call it, it is something that has always been there and always will be there, and we need to be able to talk about it. And not being able to talk about it is not helpful in any way, shape, or form. What sort of what are your lessons learned, and what have you seen throughout, I guess, starting in that space and now seeing the space and how it has developed? One is unrecognizable to the other, I would think, but still there is, there's always a lot more to do. So, what are
Always.
your thoughts there, and what are your insights that you've sort of gathered along the way?
Well, it was we're not allowed to say male, pale and stale, probably. Um, but, yes, it was a very much male-dominated profession when I came into it. I remember when I was R3 president, we did some sort of research into it then, and discovered that whilst the average age of qualification for a solicitor, say, was about 23 or whatever, the average age of license obtaining by an IP was 10 years later. So, naturally, in terms of diversity, the insolvency profession was behind, for instance, the legal profession, where I think for a long, long time, more women have been going in, particularly into litigation, than men qualifying. There's a whole other story about the glass ceiling and the age at which women are having children and when they can become a partner and everything. Um, uh, but there's been a lot of work done in diversity and inclusion, I think, and the Insolvency Service at the moment has a diversity champions thing running. For myself, I always just thought that law and insolvency, they're people businesses. We have to engage with all sorts of people in the country in distress, whether they're creditors, whether they're the business or individual in financial distress, and we have to be able to engage with all those people. Um, you need within your own business a psychometric wheel of people anyway. Different lawyers fit with different clients, different IPs fit with different businesses. They have a natural affinity with somebody. So I think it's common sense for a good business to have diversity. I think it enriches a business to have perhaps sometimes people with special challenges. In Moonbeaver, I always used to do things with, for instance, with MenCap to give people work experience, or to try and facilitate somebody's first leap into an office job, for example, and then help them through education and qualifications. So I think if you appreciate what a people business this is, and that business these businesses are built on the success of their people, they are our capital, the people, then we need to have diversity. It's much better now. There are more women. I was very pleased the other day to see Kelly Mitchell at Quantumus say that she, for the first time ever, she was having a joint appointment with another woman at Quantum, Alison Richards. So, but the fact that that has to be remarked upon at all, still in
It
2020,
shows that we're
we've
still
still got a
not
way to
there,
go.
but we're
Exactly.
we're making progress. Um, and obviously there have been, IWIRC is an organization that has basically paved the way, also a safe space for women in this historically male dominated profession. In 2024 were part of the Women in Restructuring Hall of Fame, which shows that you've been helping a lot in various capacities to actually get us where we are today.
Yeah, I think
Uh,
I think I used to think when I was young, because it was so male dominated, I didn't want to be pushed into women's groups or, women traditionally when they qualified as solicitor, they go, "Well, you could do family law." Nothing against family law, but it was, seen as a female area. And so I was a bit resistant to all female groups. And I've changed my views on that because I think there are so many organizations for men where, and I won't mention golf because, but anyway, um, but I think women do need that safe space where they can also help each other, give each other a bit of a leg up, talk about their experiences within the profession. I think IWIRC's great. It's really good. You know, in all the countries when we go somewhere, and IWIRC have their own event, um, you know, within Sol International, within Sol Europe, or with R3 or whatever. Men come along too. It's great. There are
Yeah.
male champions of IWIRC, which is fantastic. I
So let's just make sure that, because I've written it down, I always forget. It's International Women's Insolvency and Restructuring Confederation. That's what it is called, right?
Yes,
Everybody calls it
Federation.
IWIRC, but
IWIRC.
that really is the long name of it.
Yes. It's a very American name, isn't it? Confederation.
Federation, fantastic.
Yeah, no, it's a great organisation with great women in it, and and again, naturally, if you see more women in positions, senior positions, then other women can think, well, that's okay. That is the right place for me to be. And again, having Sonia Jordan as not only a female president but the first black president of R3 is great, because other black women lawyers can say, Sonia can do it. That's fantastic. I see myself in that role. And the same with anybody, you know, whether somebody's disabled or whether somebody's whatever they are, older. I'm getting to that age
Well, you
now.
know, that's
Might be age
inevitable. We're all
discrimination.
getting that, yeah.
Age
But yeah,
discrimination,
we don't want to retire because we like what we're
because
doing.
we like
And
what we
maybe we
do.
can zoom in on that a little bit,
Yes.
because uh, um, how do you describe to your, you know, your kids? Because I understand you have two daughters, right?
Three daughters.
Three daughters,
Yes.
beautiful.
Yes.
So how do you describe, you know, your work in the special sit space?
Well, I think they've always just known I did insolvency law and don't question it too much. Um, they none of them went into the law. I think they think I probably worked too hard. They had a brilliant father who stayed at home, so they had a stay-at-home parent who was probably far more relaxed with them than I would have been. I'd have been a helicopter parent, I think. Too much micromanaging, whereas he would
But
take them out
what do you
go
like
really.
about, you know, about our profession? You know, that is, I guess, the next generation is also asking you, you know, what's the why for you to
Yes,
do this?
yes,
I don't think, you know, my why was necessarily crystal clear when I started, but now over time, I can see why I'm doing what I'm doing. What's your reason for doing this, and why do you, you know, you have longevity here, so you must be doing something right.
I love it. Yeah, I think if I was explaining to somebody coming in, I think it's the fact that every day is different. I think it's a great gift to not go to work and be bored. You know, you're never bored. There's variety every day. There's a new challenge every day, even if it's another admin or another pre-pack or another antecedent transaction claim or whatever. In different people, different psychology, different problems because the people are different, a different challenge. You're either helping somebody to rescue a business or you're preventing somebody from doing bad things to somebody else. Um, so to me, it's the variety and the sense of achievement when things go right. I mean, obviously, we all have the occasion.
And what is, well, yeah, I mean, what for you is success in, you know, a special situation? Is there a definition of success, or is it the same as, you know, what you just described, namely it's different every time?
I think it's different every time. I think, you know, it's a little bit like a mediation, isn't it? You know, we are going into a situation where there's already a hole. So, you know, we're not starting off on the front foot. We're starting off on the back foot. It isn't our fault, but that's where we are, and sometimes we get blamed. But if we can make that hole slightly smaller, and we can maybe provide a small ladder for people to get out of that hole and move on to somewhere else, then we're doing a good job. And it won't be perfect, and maybe everybody's a little bit unhappy, but they're better off than when we arrived. That is a success. And if we can make it whole, like Lehman, make it all whole and better, fantastic, fantastic. Um,
Yeah. So are there, because, you know, we were talking about the legal profession, but you have also the financial advisors, you have the accountants, you have the bankers. But maybe just focus for a moment on the legal part, in the special situation space. Are there certain characteristics that you believe somebody should have to have longevity in the special sit space?
Well, certainly resilience. I think you have to be resilient. We get a lot of flack because, as I say, we come into a situation which is already bad. So, you know, and we're the person that's visible. The IP, the lawyer, we're the person that's visible. So we get a bit of flack. Sometimes you get, trolled. Yeah. So you have to be resilient, I think. People can be unpleasant to you. Certainly in my fraud cases, people can be a bit threatening. So first of all, resilience, I think. Second of all, I think you've got to be committed, and you've got to be able to perhaps see the horizon beyond the immediate problems. So perhaps a little bit of a vision, and you've got to work hard. You've just got to work hard. You're in a hole, and you've got to dig very hard to get out of it. And I think that's rewarding at the end of the day. I think it's rewarding.
There's always time pressure, right?
There's
And I
always
think,
time pressure. Yeah,
you need to make decisions
yeah,
based on imperfect
yeah,
information.
yeah,
But you do need to make
yeah,
decisions, and you need to, as you say, you need to work hard because it's very front loaded. You're piloted into something, and you need to, jump on the train that's already moving very fast, and there's no time to sort of sit around.
no.
You need to act.
And I like that, and I think a lot of our compatriots like that. They like that stress situation, that adrenaline. It's a bit like taking an exam every day, which I
Well,
don't remember
I
liking, but I
think
think
that's
it
right.
felt good afterwards.
And I think the other thing is, you said the variety. Well, it is also because this area of the law touches upon all the other specializations. So, it's not like I'm an expert in tax, or I'm an expert in real estate, or I'm an expert in, what is it, contracts or finance or litigation. But it all is there, and I need to know about it. And, also I need to know what I
Don't know.
don't know. I
Yeah,
need to have
you,
assistance on
you
that.
need to
That
know
is, I
when to
think,
ask.
also a skill that you need to have.
Yeah, and that's why it's been good coming to Westlake Bell, because we've done lots of cases where we've had to call on tax department, the banking department, the real estate department, the intellectual property department, the employment department. Where we've got that surround of advice, but you've got to be a little bit of a generalist, I think, in insolvency, so that as you say, what you don't know, and when you need an expert to pull them in at the right
A
time.
specialized generalist, I call it, right?
Exactly. Very, very, very good description. Very good description. But
Yeah, that's
but you learn something new about lots of different businesses all the time. Oil tankers one day, whiskey the next. Who knows? It's great.
yeah. No, that's definitely the case. Um, Maybe we can sort of, see where we are, and have a couple of lessons learned. One thing that is always, I guess, an issue with special sits is that it isn't a 9 to 5 job. It really, is usually all inclusive when it happens. So, how do you, fit that into your life, and how do you actually, yeah, make it not take over your life, and especially if you have, a family. How do you manage these things? I mean, you've done a great job, so no, there must be a secret or so that you can share.
He's outside in the garden. He,
You
we,
need to have you need to have a really good
you
relationship
need to
with
have a good
your
relationship.
to
So
do
yes,
this.
my husband was. I didn't have to worry about getting home in time for a nanny, or not being able to go out with clients, or not being able to work till midnight because we were in court the next day. So that has been an enormous gift to me, and my husband Philip has never questioned, you know, that I need to work that hard, because he understands the job. Chemistry would have been far less threatening, I think, possibly to life, but there wasn't the pay in chemistry certainly in the 80s. I know some of my school friends emigrated to Australia, America, whatever, because there was no money in civil engineering in the UK or in medicine in the. So we are lucky in this profession that it is well remunerated, but having help at home that you haven't had to schedule in advance and worry about, oh my God, I've overrun, has been all of the difference.
Is that the only way that it can work, or are there, other ways of making it work that you've seen over time? People do successfully. If people sort of listen to this and are afraid of
No,
that aspect of
no.
the business,
I think it's different
how
now
do you
because
manage this?
I think it's much different now because you can work from home now. There wasn't the technology to work from home. I had to commute in every day and work from the office. And if we were working for a case the next day, you had to be in the office with the paper files. Now you can work online. Your documents are all online. Everything's online. So I know a lot of women who will come home early to do children's homework and feed them and put them to bed and everything, and then work afterwards, which is also very hard. Um,
Because it's a blessing and a curse,
a
right? I
blessing
mean,
and a
you're
curse. Yeah.
talking about standing in the queue to file things, and you have to go to the back of the queue. I mean, there was a certain pace of business
Yes.
without the technology. The
Yes.
pace now is very, very fast.
Yes. It's relentless. Yeah.
No time.
Yeah, yeah. No, it is relentless, but I think it's fair to say that you've really got to get yourself the help. So if you have two parents working, you've got to buy in the help. You can't be doing the iron. You will both earn a good wage if you're both in insolvency or in law or whatever. You earn a good wage. You really need to buy in the help to give yourself the time because you can't do everything. You cannot do everything.
Yeah,
You know, you know. I I think yeah, as I say, I would have been a helicopter parent. Um,
yeah.
so it's
Which,
much better that they were with their father doing, you know, being
yeah. No,
rubbish.
I hear you. But do you think that there is more, I guess, understanding about that now, and maybe also the next generation has has a different view on sort of what the right balance is. I mean, I've always said, yeah, you need to look at the balance, but the balance changes, where you are in your career, right? My balance today is different from my balance, when I was in my 20s. But you need to keep an eye on it, and it is very difficult, especially in my view, in big law, where for a long time I've been. That there's no time to actually pause and reflect, and if everybody around you, is doing the same thing. You're in that bubble too. You can't actually see outside of it, right? But maybe that, is less of an issue these days.
Well, I think you have to value yourself in various ways. You have to value your personal time and your personal relationships so that you do have some boundaries and say, because a client can say, well, I need it today. And you go, well, why do you need it today? Really you don't. So sometimes you have to say, no, I can't do that because I'm doing this. And because everything's immediate, just because somebody sends you something on email doesn't mean it's any more important than had they sent it by post necessarily. But it makes you feel as if you've got to reply immediately. And of course, you don't have to. The question is no more simple because it's electronic than if it was on paper. You still have to think about it and perhaps remind yourself of some case law or whatever. And so I think we have to value our own time, our own knowledge and expertise, and the value of that and manage clients' expectations about how long something might take. They're paying you a lot of money, and they need to understand that, some of it's brain power and some of it requires a bit of time. And in your personal life, I think you must make sure that you have something outside work, um, because it's a stressful career, and you've got to have other things. And I think technology now enables us to do that much more. And yes, people say the younger generation are different. They are a bit different in the way they work, but they've grown up with technology, so they're more able to perhaps manage things that way. Certainly, our juniors work hard, and I know they'll work late if they're required to work late. And we make sure we have juniors in our team that also love the job, because if you love the job, it's not really work, is it?
Guess that's absolutely right. Do you believe that you need to be a very competitive person to do well here?
Um, I think it's possibly an element of that, yes. But as I say, I think in a team, you just need a whole psychometric wheel, and I've got partners and legal directors or whatever who can just deal with a huge amount of detail and get their head right down and really absorb all this massive amount of data, and they are invaluable. And I might be buzzing around, you know, helicoptering again. But, pushing things forward and whatever, but you work as a team because especially on big cases, it's never just one person, it's a team. And you need a team of differing, uh, personality types, I suppose, to make sure that everything gets done. As long as you've got a structure and, proper records and, proper plan, then everybody will have their role and everybody will be working towards that. So I'm very, very, very proud of the team that we have. They're all absolutely fantastic.
And if you, did you have a plan when you started, and did the plan materialize in the way that you had thought it through, or
No, no plan really. I ended up being managing senior partner of Moonbeaver. I loved the firm, and I loved the people. There was a lot of longevity in our staff and our partners, and there still is at Westlake Bell. And you know, old Westlake Bell, if you like, before we joined, also had that culture, which I feel is because you like the people and you want to work with them. So I wouldn't say I had a plan. I think it just developed over time. And as I sort of look back and look at the different cases that I've done and that's developed, then it's just everything's just been interesting. It's just been so interesting to do this work. And it still continues to be interesting every day. There's always something new. There's always some new challenge. There's always sometimes minor irritations like the distance for a court listing or all that sort of stuff. And I'll keep lobbying about those sorts of things until I drop dead, probably.
which, yeah, I mean, is inevitable. But what about one thing that I think, personally, is difficult, and maybe even more difficult for the next generation is the how do you deal with the opinion of others about you and about whether what you do is good or bad. Obviously, you don't live in isolation, but it can also be, very much. Uh, it can stop you doing things simply because you worry too much about how it is perceived by others. And with, I guess, social media and the technology all around it, looks like that is even more a pressure than it has been, for us when we sort of grew up. How have you dealt with it? How important is it for you to, what others think about you, and has that driven a lot of the decisions that you had to make?
Well, I care about what people think about me if they're people whose opinions I care about. I mean, I've had all sorts of trolling and videos online and all sorts of things from opponents or people connected to opponents, and why should I care what they think? I don't have a high opinion of them, so if they want to attack me or report me to the SRA again, our poor risk department, people will use any means sometimes to try and put you off or uh, make you feel bad, whatever, but they're not people whose opinions I value. So, the people whose opinions I value, I hope, have a decent opinion of me as I have of them. Everybody's a little bit sensitive now and again, but that's usually born of wanting to do the right thing and wanting to do a good job. So, of course, you care what people think, but only people, as I say, whose opinions are
So
important.
this is the resilience coming back, where you're sort of in the fire, and yeah, you need to be able to deal with
Yeah,
the heat that
yeah.
that is generated by the fire.
Yeah, exactly. And yes,
Yeah,
I feel sorry for the younger generation having to grow up with everything they do being online, and heaven, I'm very pleased my teenage years went online, but
yeah,
now they have to deal with that, and it's tough, I think, really tough. I hope they regulate more and get teenagers offline a little bit. Because if all the technology goes, if all the electricity goes at one day, what will everybody do? I don't know.
And one other thing that I think you've mentioned a couple of people already in the conversation so far, but uh, mentors, right? Another thing that is very important for people to know. Well, how do you, get a mentor? Who were your mentors? How did that come about? What is sort of your experience with mentors? Have they been important in your career?
Yes, very much so. So my training principal, as they now call it, back in Moonbeaver, was Paul Shields, who became the senior partner before me. He didn't do insolvency; he did commercial litigation, but he, in the old school manner of a training principal, was generous with time. You draft a defence, he'd sit and go through it with you, and you discuss it and that sort of thing. It gave me time, but he also let me run with ideas, let me run with things and try things. And, when we were tendering for the revenue, some of the partners were like, do we really want to do this? Yes, I really want to do this. So he let me do that. So that was one mentor. Steve Hill and Michael Pryor, obviously, mentioned.
And how did that? That was just like luck. There was chemistry. It was just not like that.
That was
It
just
just
luck.
happened.
That was just luck. Just happened to be the person that I met. And Steve and Michael, I pursued to come with to us, because they were very valuable people, and they were very good and encouraging, and they were different, just different perspective. Um, other mentors, well, little obviously my father for a certain part of his career. Stephen Baster, I think, who's been a friend a long time, and is a great lawyer, and uh, he was a solicitor before. Obviously, he was the chief judge, and has been a great. We can discuss. We usually disagree, but we can discuss cases and
But
and
which is
the market and everything
in a
else.
civilized manner, in
And
a
that's healthy
constructive
in a very
way.
constructive
So,
way. Yeah. So lots of people like that. Bill Shawn in America, one of my colleagues in America. I remember going a long, long time ago.
that's actually, yeah. I mean, can you say something about that? Because in preparation for today's conversation, I indeed saw that there's also a venture you started in the States. That is, is that something that is alongside? What's sort of the idea behind that?
Well, that was originally in again one of I think it was again one of Mrs. Thatcher's enterprises. She was encouraging people to look to Europe, and I think there were grants to do some networking and things in Europe. And we joined an organisation from Moonbeaver called Eurolink, which was again network of lawyers, and met lots of really great lawyers in Europe, and still friends. I'm going over to Salzburg to meet one of the now retired lawyers from Innsbruck this summer. So made good friends there, and then some Americans joined Eurolink, as is their wont, as they are coming over here now, and met Bill then, and we became a association of law firms registered in the States.
But under the banner of Sean Colst.
Yes, because the European lawyers all wanted Anglo names. Because at that time, EY were going into Italy and France, and a lot of I think some of the smaller European practices felt very threatened by the Americans and by the accountancy practices coming in, and so they wanted an anglicised name to be able to have a banner to practice under. So we had difficulty with the local bar associations in Europe, and so we didn't progress with that. But Bill's firm has kept the name, which I'm very happy for him to
And that is
have.
also, I guess, your sort of your network outside of the UK with, with the current firm. You can sort of assist
Yeah,
through that network.
and Ed Kraft, one of our corporate partners, is instrumental in Telfa, which is the largely American network that Westlake Bell set up long before I arrived, and they're very instrumental in that. So I just think we have to be very outward looking, um, because we have to service our clients by having good relationships across the world. And Insol Europe, Insol International, IR Global, we're members of Telfa. personal relationships with other lawyers across the world. You always learn. I remember years ago going to see a court-based mediation in San Diego, I think, with Bill before we even really thought about mediation over here. I used to get the train in with David Shapiro from S.J. Berwin, um, who was a great proponent, obviously, of mediation, and he'd done the Agent Orange mediations and everything. And he was selling it to me now, saying, "No, it's just taking jobs from the mouths of lawyers. It's a terrible thing, mediation." And I'm a total convert now. But all of those relationships broaden your horizons. They broaden your knowledge, and they broaden your capacity to help your clients.
So being active in the trade organizations alongside, the practice that you work in is a huge part of, I guess, who you have become, and how you have been, developing in the space. It's important for people to recognize that, that is equally important than doing the cases in your law firm.
Yes, not just getting work in from other lawyers, but being able to send work out and being able to learn and being able to understand the UK's position in the world, as such as it is, and with other jurisdictions. I think it's very important. And also, I just like people. I like the variety of people. I like talking to other people and learning about them and their lives and their businesses and practices and everything. And it makes every day interesting.
So, talking about the UK in the current environment and the current environment of geopolitics and everything that is related to it, if we're gonna, have a look at the crystal ball and we're gonna see what what is coming down the pike in the next, 10, 15 years in our space, special sits. Uh, um, Obviously, everybody is talking about AI. What are your views on that? Would be great. But are there other things as well that you see are important for us to keep an eye on because they will have an impact on the practice going forward?
Yes, I mean, I'm pleased to still be in practice whilst AI is getting going, so at least I can vaguely have a handle on it. At the moment, of course, it's just learning all the time. It's changing every day, and I find it useful in some things. And we're very careful to tell the juniors particularly to be wary of it and to check citations and to be, not to rely on it because but if you're looking at something, it gives you a start, perhaps, to somewhere to look for something, or to restructure something a little bit better, or if you're doing a talk or something like that, I think it's useful. Or if you're researching a holiday or whatever, that's great. And we're all getting it imposed on us anyway, because every time you're on WhatsApp, it asks you if it can help, and I tell it to shove off, and it's very apologetic and all that sort of thing. Or every time you try and write an email, it says, "Can I write that for you?" Going, I think I could probably manage, actually. I'm only typing the word yes, that's fine. So it obviously has its uses, provided it's used carefully. Um, Obviously, the worry is about that banker talking about lower value human capital. I mean, really, what are people going to do? How are we going to cope with people who are jobless because of AI? Um, you know, People are not isn't just about being paid money. It's about job satisfaction. It's about feeling value. You could have a whole
Like a purpose in life, right? It's also, yeah,
yeah, we could
exactly.
have a
It's
whole
more
class of
more
people
than
with nothing
just
to do.
bringing in the cash.
That could lead to civil unrest. We need to think very carefully about that and about how people can feel valued, and that AI is a tool and is a benefit. But it's been coming for a long time. All these. Uh, um, we all thought that secretaries would be put out of work by word processors. Well, they seem to have managed to reorganize things so that they're still invaluable. I couldn't
Everything is a
certainly
lot
manage without
faster
mine.
now.
Stacey, she's fantastic. Um, uh, yeah, so we just have to adapt as we go. It just gets little bit harder because it's so fast paced now. It's so fast paced, and change is not always good just for the sake of change. Perhaps
And where does the UK stand in, I guess, the special sit space globally? Because yeah, look, we were part of Europe, but we're not part of Europe, but we may be part of Europe,
You
and
know.
we're redefining it. I mean, you're obviously president of Insol Europe.
Yes, I
Uh,
know, and I'm English.
where does the UK fit in into Europe, and how does it sort of, is it closer or less close to continental Europe? Do you have a view on that?
I think, well, I always say that we're still in Europe. We're just not in the EU. We are very close to Europe. We have very close relationships with our colleagues in Europe, and I hope we will always continue to have those. Apart from anything else, it's very important for the peace of the world. Um, but for trade and for culture and for everything else, we're very close to Europe, and we should continue to be so. We haven't been able to make it work in the EU, so we've come out, so fine. But that doesn't mean we can't have trade agreements, work together. I think our environment in the UK for insolvency and restructuring is fantastic, largely down to having a common law environment and having a fantastic judiciary, as well as extremely talented commercial insolvency practitioners. Not to say that they haven't got all those things, many of those things elsewhere, but I do think that we have a really brilliant environment for restructuring and our commitment to doing it. And that people import work into here to get the advantage of all those things, and long may it continue. I think I wish we had a little more investment in the infrastructure in the courts and things so that we
Yeah,
could.
you can't take it for granted. I mean, also practitioners can't take the sort of, stellar commerciality and expertise of judges,
No,
for granted. I
no.
mean, Thames being like a case in point, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And w- uh, now Richard Snowden's gone to the Supreme Court. We hope we'll keep enough insolvency expertise in the all the courts below. We're lucky to have the Insolvency and Companies Court specialist court, which is amazing. And long may that have power to its elbow. But admin resource and technology resource are lacking. Well, you can see in the criminal system. Taking 5 years to get to trial is just unacceptable. It's unacceptable for the alleged perpetrator, unacceptable for the victim. In civil courts, the faster you can resolve a dispute, the more productivity you will get in the country because people are not draining their time with litigation. If you're a business that's spending all its time on litigation, you're not thinking about productivity in your business. You're wasting your time looking backwards. So we need that system to speed up. Um, I always thought that the technology and construction court system, although further away, was good. You get a trial date because a lot of cost and a lot of argument and a lot of faffing about goes on in the middle. If you had a trial date that you were stuck with, so there was a limited amount of time you could faff about in the middle, worrying about which model disclosure you were on or whatever, which just increases costs, then perhaps we'd all get a bit faster justice. But there just isn't the infrastructure at the moment.
Have you ever entertained the idea of becoming a judge? I mean, there is, a call for diversity, more women in, and more solicitors as judges. Is that ever a consideration, or do you like private practice too much?
I like private practice too much, and yeah, I think I admire the judges very much. I think they work hard. I think they get very little time to write their very detailed judgments. I sometimes wish they weren't quite so detailed because then we have to explain it to the client. I did finish one trial last year or the year before, I think, and at the end of the judgment, the client said, "Did we win?" Yes, we did.
Let's look at the back of
Yes, we did.
the 500 pages
Yeah,
where we
exactly.
won or not. But do you think that as a judge you have more of an opportunity to actually make an impact in practice as we are in private practice or not?
Well, I think they certainly do have the wherewithal to make an impact. I think a lot of the insolvency judges have made an impact, and they are a huge part of our success in. And again, with the common law system, with speed and agility, being able to tweak things to make things work, like the restructuring plans, they move along and so forth. But I think they can't be political. They can't say anything political, and so I think there's an equal need for. Um, telling it like it is, and trying to make government listen and make things work the way they should. And I know there's a lot of call on the public purse, and we need more efficiencies and more investment. But that would make productivity better, I think, if we would just have that infrastructure.
So, being a non-executive at insolvency service, you believe that maybe in that role you have more of an impact, alongside all the impact that you have in trade organizations and in private practice itself.
Yes, I mean, in the insolvency service, we're just an advisory board, but hopefully, at least I can bring my day-to-day knowledge of being in the profession to in the private sector. Hopefully, I can bring that into the mix so that decisions are made an informed environment, and they're very good and very dedicated in the insolvency service in their decision making, in their intentions to do the best that they possibly can for the country. Um, but certainly in the trade organisations and lobbying Parliament within those trade organisations, and Ensol Europe has a massively good relationship with the Commission, for example. It's very important, and I think that those sort of relationships and spending time on those relationships is very important. If you go into Parliament, a bit like when I was learning the law, people don't know a lot about insolvency. They use the wrong terminology all the time. They don't know, how things work necessarily, and every MP can't know everything. So educating people to understand how important some of these things are, I find really valuable and interesting to do.
And where do you think we're going with like cross-border insolvency, with all the sort of geopolitical, I guess, overlay we have, and big impact on day-to-day life? Do we, and in a way, sort of almost being more territorial rather than universal. So with modified universalism, are we still heading that direction, or do you think it's gonna over time change to maybe more territorialism? Or obviously, Europe is still trying to harmonize things,
Yes,
which
yes.
is tricky. Where do you think that's going?
Well, certainly we've seen some countries get rather protectionist of late, haven't we? And that's a shame. I thought we were in the free free trade economy. Yes, I think Europe is continuing to try and harmonise, and that's great. Uh, at some point, we have to tackle the situation that i- globalization is just here. We cannot. How are we going to deal with the enormous technology companies having bigger economies than some countries and not paying tax in the countries where they're selling their goods? Being able to do whatever they like. Frankly, I mean, we've got to be able to control that. In the contentious area that I deal with, y- y- um, you know, governments and countries and courts have to cooperate faster. Fraud is very fast. Assets move very fast. People have got to somehow get over themselves and cooperate better, and so that everybody's getting justice and a proper share of what they should be getting. We should.
So on the fraud side, do we think that, going forward, we're talking about, cybersecurity, we're talking about crypto and digital assets? Is that sort of the area of fraud that is, well, already there, but maybe even more so in the future? Or do you think not necessarily?
I think fraud is, one of the biggest problems we're facing. It's 50% of crime, more than 50% of crime. It has been proliferated aided by technology. So whilst you're probably still seeing the same fraud, you're now seeing human trafficked people being the boiler room in whichever country in the Far East, forced to do the fraud on a massive scale, enabled by technology, enabled by VoIP calling and whatever.
But is it fraud on a massive scale because, a few individuals are using it, in a very expert way, and therefore have a huge impact? Or do you think that actually more and more people are acting fraudulent?
It's like whack-a-mole. So if you're at the top of the fraudulent tree, you are. It's almost like a franchise. They're teaching people how to do it. And
So
presumably
it's spreading.
it's spreading, and it's tech enabled, and it's taught, and you know, even if somebody gets caught for fraud here, well, you know, maybe they go to fraud open prison for a bit and they do a bit of business networking there and learn another fraud. It's very difficult. Operationally, I mean, the National Economic Crime Centre's published, you know, the government's published its new fraud strategy um, for the next few years, and it is talking more about civil recovery, civil powers. I think civil powers are very important. You need to take the money away. You've got to deprive them of the money and not just freeze the assets, but be able to realise those faster. Confiscation orders take years after the conviction. The conviction takes years. It costs the state a fortune. Yeah, personally, I think that if you have a confiscation order and you can't satisfy it, you should be made bankrupt so that a trustee can pursue your assets forever, so that they are taken away from you and that people are deterred. Fraud shouldn't be glamorous.
Yeah, where is the individual? That is an issue
Yeah,
itself, but
exactly.
they may not necessarily be in the UK,
And it may be state-sponsored fraud, you know.
maybe state sponsored.
Yeah.
So you're part for a long time already of the charity fraud advisory panel.
Yes.
Uh, what does that do?
Well, that is, sort of as it suggests. It does an awful lot of that does a lot of lobbying with government, responds to consultations, does a lot of education. It partners, for example, with the Charities Commission, dealing with Charity Fraud Awareness Week, raising awareness. We've run campaigns before, for instance, just before the start of the student term, educating students about money muling and those sorts of things, where they may become a target to become part of a fraud themselves, and explaining to them that will just ruin their career forever. Those sorts of things. Obviously, that's a broad church, has a lot of forensic accountants in it, police, accountants, lawyers, all sorts of people. So that's a very good forum for people to join if they want to join the anti-fraud community. We have banks, Barclays have been sponsoring. And you know, again, we try and respond to consultations and educate the parliamentarians about fraud and what's needed to try and tackle it.
So talking about police, you're a special constable. I read.
I
For
am, yes.
is that are you still a special constable
I
today?
am. Yes, with the National
And
Crime
what
Agency.
does the special constable do?
Well, the special constables, which were appointed under the Crime and Courts Act 2013, could do anything really. They've had people. I think they had the head of fraud at Xerox and Ford and places like that. So people give free assistance of their own specialism. So whether that's a forensic accountant or whether that's a specialist in forgery or a specialist in banking or whatever. And in my case, I'm assigned to the civil recovery and tax team. So I try and assist them where I can with legal work or reviewing documents or doing training as well for them or for police forces in various areas of fraud, to try and give them as much resource as I can. They do an important job and they do a good job. So the NCA has tax raising powers under the Proceeds of Crime Act. So you know, they can be pursuing somebody who's not paying their tax and recovering that, and they do a good job with that.
So, Francis, what kind of person are you? Are you somebody who thrives on encouragement, or thrives on discouragement?
Do you know, that's a difficult question to ask. A little bit of both. I'm a bit bloody minded, so discouragement will just make me think, damn you, I'll do it anyway. But I obviously, like many people, thrive on encouragement because everybody is a little bit insecure, I think it's fair to say. And so I hope that I always say well done to my team when they're doing a good thing. But I, you know, so I think everybody needs a bit of encouragement. But if I think something's right, I want to fight for it. Um, So
But have in your career people, said, "Oh no, Francis, that's not for you. You can't do this." And then, that actually fires you up to say, "You know what? I'll show you.
a little
I
bit.
can actually do this."
A little bit, yes. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I hope not to the point of unreasonableness, but, yes, it does challenge me, and my father always said I was stubborn, which is true.
Well, maybe that's another trait for
For
somebody in special
insolvency,
space.
yeah,
It's
maybe.
not bad to be a little bit stubborn.
No.
Do you have like a life philosophy? And if you have one, do you apply it to work as well?
My philosophy. Well, I think, be honest and be kind. Um, just do your best, be honest and be kind. I don't think you can go far wrong that way. Just yeah, I think
Be
I
honest and be
I try
kind.
to value people. I think that's very
Yeah.
important.
And if you're asked to give some advice to the younger people that look at this and want to, maybe get into the special sit space, what would be the advice that you would give them? Say it's, young women that believe, yeah, look, I'm hearing what Francis has done. This is something I would like to do. As a lawyer, maybe let's focus on that
It's nice
because
being yeah, yeah, yeah.
it could be, financial or otherwise.
I would say just do it. It's the best, most interesting career I think you could have. I think you will have you've got to work for 40 years of your life at least. It is a gift to have something interesting to do every day, all day, and to work with such great people, to be able to help people or chase bad guys or whatever it is you're doing. It's a great career to be in, whether you're an insolvency practitioner, a lawyer, forensic accountant, in the civil service, in private practice. It's a great and interesting career to be in, and I would encourage anybody that was thinking of it to just give it a try.
And outside of your work, what are sort of the things, the passions that you have, and have you time to actually pursue those as well? Or
I make time. So I'm a passionate horsewoman. I ride. I have a rather silly French Arab um, who's he was a racehorse. He's retraining to do dressage. So I ride a lot. I just went cross country jumping in Ireland, which was great fun. I haven't done that for
wow,
a
cross
long time.
country
It
as
was
well.
great
And you
fun.
do
Yeah.
also the jumping, the normal jumping alongside the dressage.
Yes, all very low level now because I'm too old to risk falling off too often. But I love that, and I've got a new 7-year passion reinvigorated in field hockey. So I play field hockey at the moment about 4 or 5 times a week, and I absolutely love it. And play with a team. The age span in my team is 50 years, so I play with 13-year-olds up to.
Beautiful. Look, I think you have a lot more to, do in our space. So hopefully you'll be part of that space for a long time. I've really enjoyed this
Me
conversation
too.
and
Thank you, Peter.
thank you very much for making the time.
That's
Really,
a pleasure. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
you too.
See you
All
later.
right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.